Welcome back, you guys. Today I'm showing you how to make this rainbow sherbet cake. So growing up, whenever I went to get ice cream with my parents, I always wanted rainbow sherbet. It was my very favorite thing, and it is the inspiration behind this cake. To emulate the really fun swirls that are in rainbow sherbet, I wanted to make some swirled cake layers. So here I have 3 7-inch cake pans that I'm filling with 3 different flavors of batter. I flavored these raspberry, kind of a tropical orange flavor, and lime. And I then used a small offset spatula to drag some lines through the batter to create a really fun swirled effect. I then added a pretty generous layer of just regular vanilla buttercream between the layers. I am going to be using some flavored frosting on this cake, but I really wanted the colors and the flavors of the layers to stand out here, so I opted to just use some plain white buttercream. I used a piping bag to add a really nice and even layer of frosting between my cake layers, and once I had added that, I used a small offset spatula to smooth it. I always like to do a quick check with my bench scraper just to make sure that my layers are nicely aligned. Next, it's time for the ever-important crumb coat. So just like always, I start my way at the top and then I slowly work my way down the sides. So I smoothed some frosting over my top layer, and then I added a bit more between my layers just to make sure that there weren't any air bubbles or gaps between my layers and my frosting. So I smoothed this out using my small offset spatula, and then I used my bench scraper to make sure that we had some really nice and smooth sides. Once my crumb coat had chilled for about 5 minutes in the freezer and was firm to the touch, I added on my second thicker layer of frosting. Whenever I'm frosting colored cake layers with a white buttercream, I always like to add a super thick layer because you don't want any bits or dark pieces of your cake layers to kind of shine through your white buttercream. You want a really nice and smooth finish, and I think it's really important that you add enough buttercream to ensure that you get that look. Once the cake is frosted, it's time for the decoration of the cake. So I used some ice cream cones that I got at the grocery store. I simply cut them in half using a sharp knife. And as I did this, I tried to cut kind of along the seam of the ice cream cone. So some of them split very evenly and nicely, and some of them did shatter on one side. But if you buy a package, you'll definitely be able to get enough to cover your cake. I ended up using about 7 half ice cream cones on my cake, and I think I ended up cutting about 5 ice cream cones. I tried cutting them both upside down and right side up, and I found that it actually was easier to cut them right side up, which is not what I would have thought. But both methods can work. It really just comes down to being careful and also having a really sharp knife. So once they were all cut, I gently placed them on the sides of my cake, and as you guys can see, I used some thinner cake layers for this because I wanted my cake to be just as tall as my ice cream cones. However, if your cake is a little bit too tall, you can always position them slightly higher on the cake. The most important thing is just making sure that the top of the ice cream cone is aligned with the top of your cake. Now that our ice cream cones are in place, it's time to make our buttercream ice cream scoops. So I'm using 3 different flavors of frosting to create my ice cream scoops, and I started off by making my raspberry buttercream. So to create this, I used some freeze-dried raspberries and a little bit of pink gel food coloring. You only need the smallest amount of food coloring because the raspberries already add some color, and you want to keep those nice pastel shades. Next, I worked on my orange flavor, which I made a little bit tropical using some freeze-dried mango and pineapple. I also used some orange zest and a little bit of orange juice, as well as some orange gel food coloring. So this flavor was actually the most fun to make and my favorite flavor. So once I mixed all that together and I had a great kind of light orange shade, I began to work on my last frosting, which was my lime buttercream. So for this, I used the zest of 1 small lime, and I also added some green gel food coloring. So for this, I also wanted it to be pretty light, so I didn't add a ton of food coloring. And I then used a cookie scooper to scoop out my buttercream ice cream scoops. Once they're frozen, you can easily peel them off of your parchment paper and place them on top of your ice cream cones. So as you can see, I'm touching these with my fingers. They're really easy to handle. Now that our cake is fully decorated, it's time to cut in and see those beautifully swirled layers. This cake does have a ton of buttercream because the scoops are straight frosting, but it's a really fun cake idea and I love frosting, so it's something that I'm not upset about. So now it's time for the quick little taste test to see if we can really taste all those flavors that we incorporated, and it definitely passes. Thanks so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to click the like button and let me know what cakes you'd like me to make next.